Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Sportlight Podcast. I'm here with Dr. Sheldon Martin, Doctor of Behavioral Health. And today we're going to talk about managing anxiety and anxious feelings during the game or competition.
Welcome to the Sportlight Podcast for parents, coaches, and athletes. The Sportlight refers to the time in an athlete's life when they have increased ability to affect the culture around them and the increased opportunity to learn life's lessons through sports. This podcast aims to help parents and coaches capitalize on their athletes' precious time in the Sportlight. The Sportlight Podcast is brought to you by Especially for Athletes program.
All right. Well, thank you, Sheldon.
You bet.
Sheldon's coming to us fresh from Kauai, where he just spent a week with his wife celebrating their 20-year anniversary.
That's right.
So happy anniversary.
Thank you.
That's awesome. Looks very well rested and not as well shaven if you're watching this. But Sheldon, we're excited to talk to you about this. So we aren't getting into the deep, anxiety and depression, those very important topics that we've addressed with you before. But today we're actually going to talk about during the performance, those who kind of get worked up during a game and where the anxious feelings that they're having or the stress or the tension or whatever, that it impacts their performance to where they have a hard time performing. Like we all have had these moments maybe, or have played with someone who's had them where they're great during practice, but then when those lights turn on and the fans fill the stands and things like that, they have a harder time performing at the same level. And we thought it would be beneficial just to go through some of the tips and techniques that you would give with your background as a doctor in behavioral health that would help young people manage and control that. But you actually, when we did prep for this, you are pretty picky about what words you like to use when it comes to anxiety and managing versus controlling and addressing. Would you just talk us through why that's important?
Yeah, first I would avoid controlling, using that verb, simply because an increase of control also increases anxiety. And I should say an increase of a sense of control, right? This idea of, okay, I've got to control this, I've got to put it in a box, that makes the fear grow. And so I don't like to use that verb because it almost leads you down a road that's not going to be helpful. I like to use the word manage when we talk about ongoing, right? And there are gutters to be aware of and some tips and some things to kind of keep it middle of the row. And then addressing, I like to use with, this is becoming a problem. Like I need to address this in life. So for our scenario today, I think manage is a good verb because I'm in that game. I'm either afraid of the performance that I'm about to do or that just happened. And it's kind of overtaking me a little bit and I'm not there and I need to get back.
Awesome. So I'm going to take you to a few moments in my sports life, a few failures or, kids that I've been aware of that have faced certain situations. And as we were prepping for this, you were just talking about certain techniques that's used in counseling people to help manage their anxiety that would be applicable to a game time situation.
Yeah.
So, one of the greatest failures in my life was when I was fouled shooting a 3-pointer my sophomore year versus Hart High School. You were there, I think, and with no time on the clock, down by 2. And I remember going to the foul line there, and I was going to shoot those free throws. And man, my heart was thumping. All of a sudden, the fear of failure came in. The other coach called the timeout, which I thought was weird since there was no time on the clock. I didn't know you could call a timeout with no time. And I went back to my bench and I remember just not wanting to let my teammates down and everything. There was no one on the foul line. I walked there. There's 1,000 people in the stands watching, making noise because we're playing against that home school. And I started to, I had made 50, 60 free throws in a row, before. I was a good free throw shooter. But in that moment, I started to feel all those anxious feelings, have a bunch of thoughts go through my head. And I think it really did affect my performance. I don't know if there was another time where I missed 2 out of 3 free throws, right? So take me to that moment. We've talked about a few tips. Talk to me about which of these tips that we've talked through you would use in a situation like that? And, maybe you're on deck and, you have a big at bat coming up, or maybe you're a girl on a drill team and you're sitting there waiting and the other team is finishing up their performance and you're going on and you're worried about hitting that aerial, or, it just goes across a bunch of sports. Right. And so take me to that moment. What are some of the techniques that people could do to manage those anxieties, that they feel, so it doesn't affect their performance as much?
Great. Well, the first is breathing. And when I say that, a lot of people discount and set aside a piece of advice like breathing because they think, well, yes, I am breathing, or, all kinds of mental health professionals say that. And so it can't be the ingredient. But let me explain it in this context on what happens. So the fear response kicks in, right? That fight or flight. You are afraid of letting your team down. You're afraid of missing. We're going to lose. What does that mean? And our mind starts to race, and it kicks in a part of the brain that is emotional based, and it's the survival part of the brain. So what happens is when there's danger, your muscles will tense. You'll start, there's no way around that. If that part of the brain kicks in, you're going to feel tight, which is going to impact free throw shooting, right? As an example. So breathing is not just, checking off the box and breathing, but it's to get more oxygen into your bloodstream, to really take a moment and just try to breathe. What happens is it pulls your body out of that fight or flight, at least initially, and your muscles will loosen. You'll be able to think a little more clearly. So the first thing I would do is breathe, and intentionally breathe.
Yeah. And I see a lot of NBA players, for example, the camera's right up on them.
Yep.
But a lot of them will close their eyes, and part of their free throw routine is breathing.
Yeah. Not
just spinning the ball, bouncing it a certain number of times, but it seems like they work breath into it. Do you have anything? I mean, I get what you're saying, and those who watched probably saw you, but give us some more specifics about breathing. If someone's listening to this going, well, obviously I'm breathing or I'm going to die. Like, what would you say to that?
So here's one thing that when you hear it, it sounds counterintuitive, but if you try it, you can feel it. When you breathe in, try to breathe in and push out your stomach. So as you do that, you can feel breath like really go deep into the core of your body, right? Mm-hmm. And so as you do that, you're really taking deep breaths, and it forces that big inhale, big exhale. What happens when you say breathing is sometimes people think, they keep the short breath. So I'm going to breathe more. I'm going to breathe faster. They start doing a real, fast-paced breathing. That's not what we're talking about. It is slow. It's intentional. Try to push out your stomach, bring it deep into like the core, and then a big exhale. And that's just going to kind of calm everything down.
Awesome. Is there a certain number of breaths? Does it ever help to count the breaths? Does it? I know counting, and maybe we could go to that one next, but is there a connection between counting and breaths, or can there be? First, tell us about counting first. Maybe, and then maybe we'll get back to the connection between the two if there is one.
Yeah, counting is another way to kind of bring the anxiety down in that moment. So 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, right? The reason that works is when we feel anxious and that survival part is kicking in, we're looking for a solution. I mean, that's kind of internally what's in us, right? I'm starving. I need food. Like I'm on this quest for something. And so by just giving an intentional path as something is counting, it can kind of calm down some of the systems in the body. And so I would say for this scenario that you're discussing, all of that, I would set a number, and it all should be based on the scenario. Your coach called a timeout. So automatically you've got a little bit more time, right? And so you might say, I'm going to do this 10 times, 12 times, 15 times. Well, if you just made a bad play and the next snap is on its way, you might have to just, okay, do it twice. Like I've just got to get there more quickly because I don't want it to impact the next play.
Right.
And so
sitting there meditating at midfield.
Yeah. So I would say some of that is just based on how much time you have.
Okay. Awesome. And so is there some help sometimes to counting and, as you're taking those deep breaths to count down 5, 4, I could see those two maybe being combined to work, or is it better to do them separate?
No, I would combine it. In fact, to kind of lay out the sequence, I would do the deep breathing, counting, then we're going to talk about staring at something, right? Choosing an item, and then kind of a mantra. So maybe could I walk through that just a little bit?
Let's do the staring one.
So the staring one, as we talked about, your brain's trying to find a path. It's trying to find a road. It's trying to find something. You'll hear people often describe anxiety as my mind was racing, my thoughts, right? And many times they go from event to conclusion without connecting dots to dots. It's a fast process, right? All of a sudden I drop a pass and it means all kinds of things in life that I'm not necessarily consciously laying out, but they're all there. All the fears are just brought forward. Such as I just dropped the pass. We're going to lose because we lost. I'm let down my team. Now I'm not going to be able to play. Coach is going to pull me out. If I pull out, why did I do this sport instead of the other one? I'm not even as good at this one. I'm not going to go to college. Right? I mean, that can happen in 1 second, right?
Yeah.
And it's just overwhelming. And so with that, what staring at something does is it gives you something very intentional to focus on. So I would choose one thing as simple and as clear as you can be. So if you're on a field, it could, depending on whether you were in the game or out of the game, let's say you were in the batter's box and you step out for a minute, you could choose one dot on the scoreboard. And, just kind of take a moment and all your focus goes there. What it allows is the other stuff to kind of melt away a little bit, just for a moment, right? In fact, there's a very funny meme that's going around the internet that I love for this principle. You've seen the one where Chris Rock is kind of baiting Kobe Bryant on the sideline. And Kobe Bryant's has not even budging. He's sitting there looking forward, and Chris Rock is sitting there trying to get his attention. It's kind of funny that Kobe does not even pretend that he exists. I mean, I honestly think what a competitor he was. Chris Rock did not exist in that moment. I imagine there was something that he was focused on, and because of the intentional focus, nothing else could distract him. Right? So you breathe, count down. I'm focusing on something. And then a mantra, it's helpful to think this through before you're in the moment. You're not going to be able to do complex thoughts right after something bad happens, but something like, sometimes I win, sometimes I learn, move forward, right? So I just dropped a pass. I'm breathing, 5, 4, 3, 2, right? I choose something. I'm just staring at it. My energy's going in there. Sometimes I win. Sometimes I learn, move forward, right? That you can do that in between a play. You really could, right? And that I think is going to help you lower the pressure that you put on yourself. That's only going to lead to negative results, right? This is a good type of pressure. Yeah. This is, I'm going to get myself right to do better.
Yeah, that's awesome. So going back to the staring real quick, I'm just wondering what questions like my own children would have about this. Obviously, sometimes in a high school quarterback, staring might be a little bit hard. Mm-hmm. If you're getting the next play, mm-hmm. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. But is this something that can be done take me through a quarterback who's just taking a snap, big game, overthrew his receiver, and he's coming back, and it's, 4th and 5.
Yeah.
First down or game's over. And in that moment, he's feeling these feelings. Oh man, I can't overthrow again. I can't, and he needs to bring himself back. But he also has to receive a play.
Yeah.
And he also has to call it and get up to the line before the play clock.
Yeah.
So take me to that moment and take me through this breathing, counting, stare at something mantra. And I'm not pretending you're saying all of these things have to be done, but what advice would you give in that moment?
Yeah. So overthrow the receiver.
Uh-huh.
Here's how I would do that. Right. I can't think, man, my world just came apart. That was a wide open touchdown. If I don't overthrow the pass, but we have another shot. Right. And so I can at least in that moment remember breathe. So I start, okay, come on, 5, 4, 3, right? I turn. Now I'm just focused on my coach. And you think about that, and it's like, oh, yeah, we can say that quickly. But if I were to take maybe a typical high school quarterback, they might be focused on their girlfriend watching, the disappointed dad. Right? Everything is there and trying to receive a play, but it is just very intentional. I'm staring at the one place where I've got to play. Right? I'm going to take a second. I've got it. Okay. And now I'm going to, as I'm breathing, I've got the play. I've got my focus. I'm going to turn. Right. And I can kind of do a mantra. Sometimes you win, sometimes you learn. Okay. I'm moving forward. We got another shot. Call the play. Right. That sequence it only sounds like it could be impactful if you walk the other road. Oh man, I just overthrew him. Okay, there's the play.
Billy's dad's yelling at me.
Yeah. And you turn to the huddle, and all of a sudden you were in such not a good spot. You're like, wait, what was the play? Yeah. Right. That type of thing is very common because they don't take a moment to separate out the good moments, right? And say, okay, here we go. I've got the play and move forward. The more an individual can think linear in a short period of time, the better, right? The more I can think, get the play, give the play, mantra, call the play, right? Like we're going to run the play. The more they can do that, it's going to help calm all of our systems down because they're going to feel like they're going in 1,000 directions. Does that make sense?
Oh, totally. In fact, Dustin, as you know, trains quarterbacks, and I hear him, I won't get the phrase exactly, but he often says, clear, next play. Like clear, next play, right? Like almost this vision he gives his quarterback of wipe the slate clean.
Yeah.
Next play. And that, obviously you need that in sports. Otherwise, when you start having one failure compound and become exponential to many other failures where you're losing 3 plays from right now because you're getting all worked up. And so I love what you're saying about this linear. In fact, it would be a good, just a good practice where we have these rhythmic games. A volleyball player serving, a baseball player can step out of the box or put one leg out of the box, and a football player gets the play and has that routine. A dancer, has what they do right before they go on to the court.
Yeah,
it seems to me a basketball player has that. Here's what I do in my free throw routine.
Yep.
Whenever there's a routine, to make it linear and work these things in almost on a habitual basis.
Yeah.
Is there benefit to doing that habitually, or should you reserve some of these things for when the stress really comes on? Or is it better to just, this is what I do every time and manage the stress as you go?
No, I think it's something you can practice. I mean, you mentioned basketball. If you're playing, the wing type thing and you're a shooter, the benefit of a coach saying, okay, stop, catch, shoot. Mm-hmm. What they want them to kind of like this play, come to a jump stop, get the ball, shoot, right? that type of repetitive approach in the moment is going to lead to them stop, then catch the ball, then shoot, right? As opposed to trying to shoot while I'm grabbing it. Those things, the more you can simplify it and break it down, and that is the routine, right? I've seen football teams do this with the snap, right? So you've got to first snap the ball, then it's a handoff, then it's a throw, right? And so they'll come up with a couple of 3-4 words. Here's the sequence, right? And you can build that into the routine, which really helps when pressure goes up, that there's 3 words. I've got to do this. I've got to do this. I've got to do this.
You're just doing what you always have done.
That's right.
And the only difference is it's going to determine the game.
Right.
But when we put that weight on us, instead of, okay, this, then this, then this, breathe, count, stare, mantra, and just kind of come up with the routine, whatever that looks like in your sport, whatever the rhythmic instances where you could do that in your sport. If you could get into the habit of practicing that and doing that, then it'll help you to manage and address anxiety during sports.
Yep.
So
awesome. Absolutely.
Awesome. Now, you mentioned one other thing that I was interested in, music.
Yeah.
Tell me your thoughts about music and how music can help manage anxious feelings. I assume this is kind of pregame.
Could be. I mean, depending on the sport, right? I mean, there might be maybe a pitcher when comes in on the dugout. I mean, there's probably a
wild thing.
Yeah, that's right. A little major league, something you can do. But the reason music can be helpful is it has a great ability to engage kind of the emotional centers, which can control, focus. It can control kind of hype a little bit, and getting up. It can also calm down quite a bit. What music does is it allows your brain, kind of those thoughts to go somewhere, and focus on one thing can actually increase. I know it's a little nerdy, but for example, they've done some studies with children like having classical music playing in the background and trying to learn something in school. It wasn't a distraction. It actually enhanced. Right. The brain was able to kind of catch on to something, let go a little bit, and it actually increased the focus of the thing they were doing. Now, it can be distracting, but many times if a player can find kind of music as a way to kind of get to that spot, you'll see this a lot with professional athletes, right? In the pregame, they're all earbuds. Yeah, somewhere. They're somewhere in the world. No one knows what they're listening to, but it's not an interaction. They're kind of going somewhere to get themselves in a spot where they feel like they're going to be able to perform at their best. So I think that using music is a really good way to block out distraction, right? You've got a lot of voices. You can kind of control the voice a little bit when with music. And it's somewhere where you can kind of distract yourself a little bit so that you can focus. And the music itself can also kind of increase what you're able to do. And so, yeah, I think players should go through and maybe think of some scenarios, right? I knew a pretty successful athlete who, with the mantra thing, anxiety was just taking over. I mean, it really was becoming way too much. He recorded his mantras on like a voice memo. And after, bad plays and that, he would come off and he didn't even have the ability. He didn't feel like to remember it. So he just played them. And that's what he went to. And it helped. It helped him quite a bit.
Just over and over again.
Yep.
Those mantras.
Yep.
Awesome. And I assume that we've in previous podcasts talked about sometimes it's good. People are different places on that emotional spectrum, and so to kind of, maybe it's better for someone on the bus ride there to listen to more mellow music and then to get the adrenaline pumping and things like that to ramp it up the closer you get to the game, where others, they might need that mellow music up until the time of the game.
Yeah.
Just kind of depending on where we are on that spectrum. I know, man, I never had a hard time getting up for a high school basketball game until we went to Little Rock. Do you remember that? Like they had like
empty gym, no noise,
empty gyms, and they weren't, anyway, I won't say that, but it wasn't a game that you were like, whoa, put that one on the calendar every year. And it just felt like you always underperformed there. And so sometimes maybe even managing like, what am I feeling going into this? It might even vary from instance to instance with an individual. This is what I need. I need more something that brings in the adrenaline versus going to play Highland, a rival. That was our rival growing up. And yeah, you didn't need much. I probably needed to be a little bit more mellow when it came to that. And so music can help manage that.
Yeah, it can. I think we saw this in the NBA during COVID when there weren't fans.
Yeah.
There were players requesting, like, can we blast fans cheering when it's a home game for us, even though we're all in Florida, right? I mean, there was such a part of the routine of how they were finding, energy and momentum that, we can build it in a little bit because we can use our own music.
Awesome. Well, Sheldon, thank you.
You bet.
Very much. This is super helpful. I know for some kids who deal with panic attacks and things like that, these things are also the things that will help manage those feelings of panic when they start coming up and will really help them to manage that and hopefully not be debilitated by it as well.
Everything we mentioned today would be extremely useful in the midst of a panic attack as well. It'd be the same advice. It has to be simple, or there's nothing else would land in that moment. And so, it works regardless of how severe someone may be experiencing these.
Where they are on that spectrum.
That's right.
Little anxiety about a big moment in a game or a panic attack, just worried about letting down your team and everything else that some kids face. These things would help with either of those instances. And so, well, awesome. Thank you, Sheldon, so much. And thank you all for joining the Sportlight Podcast. Please subscribe and share this with people who would be interested in this particular podcast today with Sheldon, but also with all of those who might be interested in past podcasts. If you're someone who just came upon this podcast, we encourage you to go back and listen to some of our other ones. Eyes up, do the work.
This has been the Sportlight Podcast from Especially for Athletes, sponsored by Coca-Cola. You can learn more about Especially for Athletes by visiting the website at especiallyforathletes.org. You can also learn more about the book, The Sportlight, by Shad Martin and Dustin Smith at especiallyforathletes.org/book.